Coming up today, with the rival parties no closer to a compromise, Korea's National Assembly Speaker says he's not afraid to use his authority to resolve the gridlock over the readjustment of the nation's electoral districts. The Korean government announces its economic growth target for next year at 3.1%. It's higher than the majority of forecasts put forward by private financial institutions. Plus, schools in Los Angeles have been shut as police investigate an unspecified but credible threat emailed to the school district. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 16th of December. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, Korea's National Assembly Speaker has vowed to use his authority to ensure a proposed plan for redrawing electoral districts is put to a vote before the year is out. Let's go straight over to our political correspondent, Ji Myung-gil, who is on the line for us. So, Myung-gil, you were at the Speaker's press conference just around 30 minutes ago. What did he have to say?
Good afternoon, Mark. The Assembly Speaker, Chung Yu-ah, told reporters he may choose to wield his authority, forcing a direct referral of a bill to resolve the current gridlock over readjusting electoral boundaries. In the event of a natural disaster, state of emergency, or through bipartisan agreement, the National Assembly Act allows the Speaker to put a bill to the vote in a plenary session. Chung intends interpreting the current situation as a state of emergency. It says the current situation could harm next year's general election because if rival parties fail to pass a new electoral bill by the end of this year, the current district system will be invalid from January 1st next year. This will be an unprecedented scenario in the lead-up to April's general election. Newcomers who registered yesterday as preliminary candidates would technically be campaigning in constituencies that may be scrapped or rendered invalid next year if the National Assembly does not approve a new electoral map by the end of December. The ruling Samuel Party praised Chung's decision, claiming December 28th should be the deadline. However, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party wants the Speaker's plan withdrawn. Meanwhile, Chung remains wary of exercising his authority to independently propose forcing a vote on economy-related bills and counterterrorism bills that the presidential office has been pushing the Assembly to pass. He said the bills needed bipartisan consensus before they clear the Assembly. Well, that's all for now. Mark?
Thank you very much, Myung-gil, for that report. Now, the Korean economy is facing a tough 2016 ahead, with multiple factors posing challenges from both the domestic and global front. With that, private institutions are rather skeptical about Korea achieving 3% growth next year, but the government remains confident, pledging to keep a close eye on low prices. Our Hwang Ji-ae has this report.
Korea expects its economy to expand 3.1% in 2016. That's a trim from an earlier forecast of 3.3%, but still higher than the mid-2% range that a majority of private financial institutions have put forward. It says it will also evaluate the country's economic expansion based on current prices, offering not only real GDP growth but nominal growth figures as well, a move reflecting the government's drive to keep better tabs on deflationary concerns. Korea's consumer price growth has remained in the 0% range since November last year and edged up 1% last month from a year earlier. At current prices, the government expects to see 4.5% growth next year. To reach that target, it has pledged to boost the country's recovery momentum by front-loading around a quarter of next year's budget in the first 3 months to pull the country out of its low-growth rut prompted by slowing exports. The economy management plan for next year also puts emphasis on easing regulations to boost investment and come up with new growth engines. The government plans to designate regulation-free areas in 14 different regions across the country with the goal of fostering industries like biohealth, eco-friendly vehicles, and cosmetics. This project follows the state-driven program this year to build 17 creative economy innovation centers around the nation. Also on the agenda for next year is completing structural reforms in the labor, education, finance, and public sectors. But experts are skeptical as to whether the government will be able to push through such reforms, with Parliament still deadlocked over pending labor bills.
Korea has general elections next year and the presidential election the year after. With political events like these, the government will face major opposition in completing the reforms, and they may lose steam.
Another challenge Seoul will take on is diffusing threats posed by snowballing household debt and corporate debt in the face of a possible rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve. The move will allow troubled firms to begin corporate workout programs before their deteriorating financial health becomes irreparable. Through these structural changes, the government aims to realize growth that can be felt by the public, as much of the focus this year was on regaining the country's economic vitality. 황지혜, Arirang News.
Now, in line with the government's plan for next year, Korea's central bank has cut its inflation target rate for the next 3 years. Shin Se-min reports.
The Bank of Korea has set its annual inflation target at 2% for the next 3 years, scrapping its current policy of using a target band for consumer price rises. That's down at least 0.5 percentage point from the current target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. The central bank says the target is higher than the current inflation rate that had been rooted in the 0% range for 12 months until November. Consumer prices have missed the Bank of Korea's target every month for more than 2.5 years. The central bank said slowing global demand and low global oil prices caused a drop in prices on the supply side, exports to slow, and eroded Korea's price competitiveness. Along with the revised target rate, the central bank has pledged to take greater responsibility to ensure it attains its goal. If the actual inflation rate deviates 0.5 percentage points below or above the target for 6 consecutive months, the governor of the BOK will be required to hold a news conference to explain why.
Lowering the target to 2% is a sign Korea is following the lead taken by developed countries like Canada and the UK, and shows its determination to achieve stable economic growth down the line.
The BOK also projected that Korea's growth potential to 2018 will stand between 3 to 3.2%, down from the mid-3% it had earlier forecasted. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, one of the most anticipated financial decisions in recent times will be announced in roughly 16 hours' time. The US Federal Reserve's top policymakers have started their two-day meeting, where the vast majority of analysts expect them to pull the trigger and start raising rates. While Wall Street reacted positively, there are looming concerns for emerging markets, including Korea. Kim Min-ji reports.
It's widely expected that the U.S. Federal Reserve will raise rates this week for the first time in nearly a decade. According to a recent Wall Street Journal poll of 65 economists, 97% said the Fed will probably raise rates from near zero. Adding more certainty to the data-dependent decision, the U.S. Consumer Price Index edged up 0.5% on-year in November, slightly above market expectations. The country has also posted improved job market data, adding 211,000 jobs in November. The jobless rate also fell to a more than 7-year low of 5% last month. Ahead of the Fed's announcement, U.S. stocks closed higher on Tuesday as energy and financial shares rebounded on a pickup in oil prices. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up 0.7%, the S&P 500 added over 1%, and the Nasdaq rose 0.87%. In the UK, the FTSE 100 gained 2.45%, while Germany's DAX 30 added more than 3%.
Well, I think the liftoff is actually helping propel stocks higher. We've been waiting for this moment, it feels like, for a year plus, and it's finally here, and the economy can sustain higher rates.
But there are fears a rate hike could trigger a massive capital outflow from emerging markets to places with higher returns on investment. More than $33 billion flowed out of emerging markets in the third quarter alone, marking the highest amount since the global financial crisis.
Korea saw more than $10 billion leave its shores. Analysts say a rate hike is likely to do more harm than good as capital outflows coupled with slowing growth in China and uncertainty in emerging markets could spark a financial crisis. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, it's some good news for frequent flyers. That's because domestic and foreign airlines operating within Korea will waive fuel surcharges on international flights for the fifth straight month in January on the back of low crude prices. According to Korean Air and Asiana Airlines on Wednesday, fuel surcharges are levied when the average price of jet fuel traded on Singapore's spot market is above 150 cents per gallon and waived when its price falls below that point. Now, the price for flights in January has fallen to about 127 cents, so far below that barrier. All airlines will waive fuel surcharges on international flights departing from Korea throughout next month, regardless of the departure date. For domestic flights, fuel surcharges will fall to around $1 from the present $2. The number of newly hired workers in South Korea fell in November, with just over 285,000 added to the workforce, and that's down from over 300,000 workers coming into the workforce each month since September. Also, the youth unemployment rate rose correspondingly to 8.1%. That's an on-month increase of 0.7 percentage point. Statistics Korea attributes the fall in monthly employment to bad weather conditions, which reduced the number of jobs in the farming and fishing sectors. It added that available work in the wholesale and retail sectors also shrunk a lot. Now, public schools in the Los Angeles area will reopen on Wednesday after being closed because of a security threat. More than 1,000 schools in the district were shut down Tuesday, affecting some 650,000 students. Authorities inspected all the schools and have given the all clear. School board members are said to have received emails threatening to target multiple schools with assault rifles and explosives in backpacks and packages. Officials in New York City said they received a similar threat but deemed it a hoax, and the schools there stayed open. California is naturally on edge following the deaths of 14 people in San Bernardino, 100 kilometers east of LA, in a shooting carried out by a married couple thought to have been inspired by the Islamic State group. NASA has recently released a new study that shows air pollution patterns around the world over the last decade. The research shows changes in air pollution patterns are not random and are mostly related to human activity. Sun Jung-in has more.
Using new high-resolution global satellite maps of air quality indicators, NASA scientists analyzed trends in nitrogen dioxide levels around the world from 2005 to 2014. Nitrogen dioxide is a pollutant emitted by automobiles, power plants, and industrial activity. Compared to the map 10 years ago, China saw an increase of 20 to 50% of nitrogen dioxide, much of it occurring over the middle west of China due to the rising use of coal for power. Seoul had the joint fifth highest level of nitrogen dioxide. Only Beijing, Guangzhou, Tokyo, and Los Angeles had worse air quality than the South Korean capital. But on a brighter note, Seoul's concentration level has decreased by 15% over the last decade. Three major Chinese metropolitan areas, Beijing, Shanghai, and the Pearl River Delta, also saw nitrogen dioxide reductions of as much as 40%. The US and Europe are among the largest emitters of nitrogen dioxide, but both regions showed the most dramatic reductions between 2005 and 2014. This was largely due to their efforts to reduce air pollution through environmental regulations. Sun Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, one of the biggest steps yet towards ending sanctions on Iran, the United Nations nuclear body has decided to close its investigation of Tehran's past nuclear activities. In a report Tuesday, the International Atomic Energy Agency said there was no credible indications of activities in Iran relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device after 2009. It also found that many allegations on Iran's nuclear history are baseless. Experts say the report essentially means Western countries have no good reason to delay the lifting of sanctions on Iran, in line with the landmark agreement reached in Vienna earlier this year. Given that investigations into Iran's past are now closed, the IAEA's key responsibility now is to verify Tehran's current and future nuclear activity. Now, North Korea had originally been planning to hold a very rare party congress in May of next year, but the regime has pushed it back by 5 months. During a report on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to a catfish farm inspection on Wednesday, the Korean Central News Agency said the 7th Congress of the Workers' Party will now be held on October 10th, 2016. The news agency had, as we previously mentioned, announced the first Congress of its kind in 36 years was supposed to be held in May. Now, it's not yet known what prompted the delay. Experts believe Kim Jong-un will announce a leadership reshuffle to cement his control over North Korea and also to tout his economic achievements. Well, those are stories we've been following on this Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. You also have a smartphone application. You can just search for Arirang TV in the usual places. Have a great day. Goodbye.